welcome to the Moviescramble podcast, where I am joined in this episode by both of my esteemed colleagues once again. John, Simmy, how are you both?
I'm good.
Yeah, same. Hot and sweaty. It's unusual for Scotland over the last week or so. It's been fairly unrelenting, and I think half the population is slowly broiling. It's just, it's not, pasty face with really red arms is not a great look in anybody, but we tend to roll it
off.
Yeah.
we are definitely not built for anything above 12 degrees and slightly breezy. It has been pretty unforgiving. I think it's been 28, 29 most days, and I've basically just turned into a drumstick squashy, so I'm excited for the rain to come back and for everything to go to normal. So we are doing something different in this episode for your listening pleasure. Instead of discussing a film, we are going to be discussing the industry in general, specifically cancel culture. So from Armie Hammer to Zachary Levi, it seems like every corner of Hollywood has its own dark story to tell. And in the past year alone, we've seen the likes of Johnny Depp, Alec Baldwin, Ezra Miller, Will Smith and Gina Carano all be labelled as cancelled. So who gets to decide who is cancelled, and is there ever a path to redemption? So I thought I would start by asking you both what you think sort of about cancel culture in general.
It's always been around in one form or another, especially in Hollywood. Cancel culture has just been an aspect of pretty much every actor and executive's greatest fear, I think. If you look back to the early days of cinema, there were actors, stars who were cancelled, the likes of Fatty Arbuckle, who got cancelled, for instance, for something he was actually found not to have done. It was something that he was around, unfortunately, because our actors are basically around all these scenes that maybe they shouldn't be because they've got too much time in their hands and they've got too much money in their hands as well. But it's always been there. It just seems to be now that we are in an age where there is far more content going around with streaming services, network television, cinemas, where you're getting a big new release every week, every 2 weeks. So if there's more content, there's more actors. If there's more actors, there's more people. And if you just have it on a percentage-wise, then there's more sleazy characters as well. So we're getting more and more of it because of that, and because of the fact that everything is available all the time. Somebody could say something 1 minute, and 6 months later, it can turn out to be a scandal, and it's something that hits them the blind side. We've found out with people with tweets 10 years old. James Gunn tweets were 10 years old. Yes, they were particularly sick, but it seemed to be jumped on from absolutely nowhere. This guy had a career, and a very successful career, when he went to DC for 5-6 years before anything like that actually hit. So yeah, I just think it's a numbers game more than anything else.
Yeah, and as you say, John, it's always been there, and you'll get some people that try and say that cancel culture doesn't exist. But it always has. They used to just call it blacklisting back then. Now they call it cancelled, and that's a label that's used sometimes wrongly and incorrectly. People will say, "Oh, he's cancelled," but he's not. He's cancelled in the sense it's like somebody said something that they shouldn't have, and they went, "Yes, I'm cancelled now," but they don't even know what it means. It's a strange one, but you talked about the redemption thing, and James Gunn's a good example of that, because he did get a redemption in the sense that it gets cancelled at Marvel, so to speak. And well, call it cancelled, call it what, it was sacked, so it did get cancelled in the sense he was told he'll never work in Hollywood again. But he did get sacked from his job. Went to DC, went, "Well, we'll take you." And then you had the cast, the Guardians side of him, and Disney relented and took him back. Let him finish the story. Now he's in charge of DC. Things worked out pretty well for him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the exception rather than the rule, because I'm thinking about, one of the things that I thought about was, do you actually just think that celebrities having social media has left them more exposed? Because, we're all different people than we were 10 years ago, and maybe you did tweet something that is unacceptable by today's standards, or maybe you've liked something recently that is inappropriate. I'm thinking about, Zachary Levi obviously seemed to, for some bizarre reason, like during the press run for Shazam 2, started to go super right wing, very anti-vax, like anti-pharma on his Twitter and things like that. Do you think that just by the mere fact that we're now more exposed to celebrities in the way that we feel like we almost have this direct contact with them through their social media channels, do you think that leaves them in a more vulnerable, I say vulnerable position, because ultimately if you're an arsehole, you're an arsehole, and if you're tweeting nasty stuff, that's it. But do you think that there's more chance for you to slip up just because we have these platforms now?
Definitely. I mean, the things celebrities are tweeting are probably the conversations the ones had in private, and now they're just telling the world.
I think that's fairer for a lot of us, though.
Yeah.
I think things that you used to say, you would just now tweet out.
Aye, but that's the thing. It's like it's right, whether Republican or questionable views with celebrities isn't a new thing. It's just, as you say, they can now tweet it and tell the world it rather than have a conversation with our pals at a party and nobody ever hears it, so nobody ever really tells.
You've got to wonder about these stars, though, because they don't work in isolation. Like I hinted at earlier, everything's got to do with money. So therefore, a star has to maintain a certain profile. So therefore, he has staff. And a lot of the time, staff handle the people that you don't hear anything about. They don't make any controversial statements on any of the social media channels. You can almost guarantee that they do not handle their own social media. It's handled by somebody within their team, and they vet everything that this star is saying before it actually goes live. It's just the ones who, for whatever reason, have said, no, it's my voice. It's going to be my words. And that's really when it starts to go off the rails for them. So you've got to wonder why, if some of these people who, the likes of Zachary Levi was a very, very strange one, because you would have thought that the powers that be at DC would have been all over him just during after it finishes, after Shazam flops spectacularly, then he can go and do whatever he wants. But while he's working for them, you'd have thought that there's something written down, some contract saying, don't be an arse. Don't write anything that's going to make you look daft and therefore reflect badly on the product that we're trying to recoup our money on. It doesn't make sense sometimes.
And that to me was like, it was almost like, I don't know if he was going out of his way because they knew Shazam 2 was going to flop, and he was like, oh, well, I can be myself now anyway, because we know this is going to be shit. But even things like, celebrities who were clearly breaking like COVID lockdown rules and then posting it on their social media. I'm not saying that merited them getting cancelled or whatever, but it does make you think, oh, you're way more exposed than, not that the studio system was right, obviously, but it created an image of stars, and it was like, well, this is them as a homemaker, or this is them as an actor, or this is them, helping the poor or the army vets or things like that. Whereas now it's a total free-for-all, because as you say, John, unless you've got staff who are very carefully curating an image of you akin to the studio system, and you're posting videos like, oh, I'm jetting off to a big party, and everybody else is sitting at home going, well, I can't see my gran. How is this fair? Like, I do think it leaves them in a more, I don't know, I want to say vulnerable position, but vulnerable is not the right word. They're definitely more exposed, I think, is the
yeah. I mean, if you look at just the DC examples that we've talked about, obviously Zachary Levi was promoting Shazam, and currently you have Ezra Miller coming out and doing his first sort of interviews for 18 months, something like that, in support of The Flash. Now, if you look at those two, it's two DC movies, two big budget films. With Shazam, the studio has just kind of distanced himself from Zachary Levi. He just went, nothing to do with us, that's well out there. But with Ezra Miller, after all his troubles, they supported him. They tried to change the narrative. They made sure that he was out of the public eye for a long time. Obviously, stories were still circulating, but there was no added fuel for the fire, because they knew a lot of their future plans for these superhero films depend on The Flash. The Flash has been used as a sort of reset point.
Right, because I was just about to say, and why do you think that is? Because I always remember, do you remember when Tom Cruise had his jumping on the sofa, I'm so in love, and then he just disappeared from PR for a while, because it was clearly like someone had a word and gone, okay, if you want to work again, you know, we need to take you away from the, and I feel like that's definitely what they did with Ezra Miller, and I wondered why he did get a slightly different treatment. But obviously if he is or his character is the foundation of the next stage, then that's an investment for them, isn't it? Making
Whereas
sure that
they've looked at Shazam 2 and thought, no, there's something wrong, because they track the progress, they track the numbers before it actually comes out, and they obviously realised that Shazam wasn't going to be the hit that they thought it was because of all the negative information around it, with obviously to do with The Rock and everything and all that as well. And obviously the icing on the cake was Zachary Levi becoming a right-wing nut. So they obviously learned lessons from that as well and says, well, we're not doing that. But yeah, it really is all about money. It's about, they knew they were going to have to make money on the Flash film, so therefore they do that. But it's again, it comes down to money. If you look at other examples, if you look at music, for instance, the difference between Gary Glitter and Michael Jackson. Now, they both fuck kids, but Michael Jackson's estate is much larger and there's more monetary value in there. So that's why he's, even years after he's died, they're still trying to rehabilitate him, still trying to make the king of pop and all this sort of stuff. It's pretty much the same, different industry, same idea.
No, but I think that's right, because I think, I mean, it goes across sports as well. You know, I didn't obviously realise until Sammy and I had a conversation that, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo was accused of rape, but the portrayal of him is that he does all this charity work and all this sort of thing. So there is a sort of rehabilitation for some, but maybe not for others, even on a lesser scale. I mean, Lionel Messi obviously has famously dodged an inordinate amount of taxes, and I know that's not the same as, you know, physically assaulting someone, but but he's so good at football, so there's almost like a free pass.
But that's a fair point as well. You can, and that's why it's kind of hard to really quantify or narrow down the cancel culture idea, because not everything is the same. You know, you get Harvey Weinstein's and then you get Zachary Levi's. You could cancel both of them, but they've done completely different things to get somebody's ire. And then you get the idea of, let's be talking fucking kids. Roman Polanski, he's not cancelled. He got standing ovation at the Oscars, and it's like, well, his image was never even rehabilitated. It was almost a case of, we've just kind of let that go. The only reason he's not went back to America is he got arrested. Hollywood have wrote letters in support of him and stuff.
But this is the thing. And the thing is, the girl that he's alleged to have assaulted was, 13 at the time? This isn't just like, you know, a mix-up after a nightclub or something like that, where you thought someone had said, yeah, you know, this is a very clear case of, you know, grooming or whatever. And so this is what I don't get as well, because there are lots of actors who still, in interviews today, would say that they would clamour to work with him. Like, why?
They wrote a letter. I can't remember who signed it, but I'm pretty sure Martin Scorsese signed it as well. So it was big names.
Meryl Streep did. I know that for a fact.
It was basically the letter said, let it go type thing, let him back. It was Whoopi Goldberg famously said it wasn't rape.
Jesus
it's the justification of it, isn't it?
And I went to see Kevin Smith 2 years ago, and I don't know why that come conversation is a question, but I always remember Kevin Smith saying this, and I'll never forget this line. I love The Pianist as much as the next guy. It's an amazing film, but it doesn't give you a free pass for fucking kids.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think that him in particular, I mean, I guess that, so what you're saying then is like, you know, can you separate art from the artist? And obviously everyone knows that I was the world's biggest Kevin Spacey fan, and obviously all of the allegations have come out against him. And to me now, not that I've watched it since, but I think if I went back and watched American Beauty, I would feel very differently about that film.
I watched The Flash yesterday and I really enjoyed it, but the whole time watching it, I kept looking at Ezra Miller thinking, a wrong one. I couldn't get that out of my head that he's in this film still. I found it hard to separate that watching it. And you're right, I'm trying to think of films that, even if I went back and watched Kevin Spacey stuff, and I'm not the biggest fan you are, I would find it hard to not be like, you know. I even get that way even watching Wednesday, but Miramax films, and see that Miramax thing come at the start.
Yeah, well, I was watching one of the Austin Powers films, and there's a wee spoof bit in that where it's famous actors play, they actually do the Austin Pussy film,
Yeah.
and it's Tom Cruise, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Kevin Spacey are the three main actors, and you're going, okie dokie, yep, that would never happen, not now.
Yeah. But then I just think that so here's the thing, right? I think it's very obvious to go, okay, well, I am going to boycott Kevin Spacey films or whatever, and they obviously famously did replace him with Christopher Plummer and All the Money in the World. But then, to be honest with you, I couldn't tell you what films were produced by Harvey Weinstein or not, and so I don't know if that Miramax logo or whatever came up at the start, it would kind of make you go, oh. But I don't know, do you think that people actively boycott films at the box office to try and damage the star or the director or the producer or whoever it is that may have, had allegations against them?
Yes, because...
No, John, you're going.
Well, what I was going to say is there is an element of sort of pre-hate for films now before they actually come out for whatever reason, and one of them is because a certain person has been cancelled and everything. There are review bombs put up on IMDb, 1 out of 10 for films that have never actually been released yet. And they've obviously taken measures to stop that now, but there are other sites that are not, that haven't implemented things like that. So in all these aggregator sites, you get reviews of film, like sort of aggregated reviews, and they're really low because there's been so many 1 out of 10 reviews of films. So yeah, there is a concerted effort by people to basically, before a film actually hits cinemas, it's been deemed to be terrible because of who's in it. Sorry, Thomas, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, because I was just trying to think of something else. So you had an actual point. I'm trying to think of examples where an actor, even myself, films come out, and an actor in it, and I've been a bit kind of that. Even an example of Todd Phillips. When Joker came out, there was people that automatically decided they were going to like Joker based on stuff Todd Phillips had been saying in the press run. I get that these kind of things can take their view on something, but again, it's where does it end between somebody saying something you don't like, somebody being a dick, somebody being offensive, somebody being racist, somebody being sexually assaulting somebody. It's like this sliding scale sometimes just gets looked upon as an even playing field. And I find that weird. And again, it's like some people at Roman Polanski get a pass.
Perfect example from that very film is the use of a Gary Glitter song just before he does the walking down the steps. And it was only controversial really in a few countries. It wasn't controversial in America because they don't really know who the guy is. That music is used. It's used in sports in between, like timeouts and hockey games and all sorts of things like that. So it's just part of their culture, and you say, "Oh yeah, nice wee reference there," but it's something completely different here. So it's exactly the same.
So is it only people like, for example, say like in Britain, who are aware that Gary Glitter's a pedo?
No, they're aware. It's just probably when they realised it was a Gary Glitter song when they heard it. They're associating it with something else, like
sports or something.
With Matt, the baseline for the chain used.
Formula One.
Aye.
Yeah.
That's what people would recognise that from, rather than go, it's actually a song.
But even that film, I feel like, generated a lot of cancelled talk because people didn't react well to a character. So not even like, Joaquin Phoenix is he's this, that, and that, or Todd Phillips is this, and this. It was, we don't like this character because they think that he is the epitome of toxic masculinity. Like, I don't know how you go about cancelling a character, but that was very much the vibe that was going around at that time.
No, you're right, and that's actually a very interesting point. When we start cancelling characters because people don't like a character, and you're like, come on. You don't have to like Succession, for example. You don't have to like characters in a show or a film. Not everything's there for your fluffy entertainment.
Yeah, it's challenging you. That's what character. That's what it's supposed to be.
Do you imagine they made American History X now? I don't think people would accept the fact that Ed Norton's character has a redemption arc. I don't think people would accept that.
I think we have, in some cases, fallen into this situation where you want to see bad characters punished, whereas with Succession, Or to use a Kevin Spacey example with House of Cards, what I loved about those shows was that there was absolutely no one to root for, no one you could see, oh, I could be that character, or they're similar to me. It was just everyone's a bastard. And that's okay, because I don't think you need, as you say, not everything's for fluffy entertainment. But I think if we get to the stage where we are actually cancelling characters, that's a whole... I can't even explain that. I think that we do have very much these days trial by social media or trial by public opinion. And if you tweet something or say something at a press junket that's perceived as wrong, it might not have been wrong a year ago, but the mood in the camp has changed.
How can we predict what's going to be offensive in years to come?
I think there's certain markers that are always going to be offensive, but I think that I'm obviously not encouraging people to, express extreme views, or whatever, but I am slightly worried about, trial by social media. The example that I can think of, and this isn't a film example, but Margaret Atwood had retweeted an article about, I think it was a Canadian hospital that was going to change the word mother to birthing parent or something along those lines. She didn't actually tweet anything with it. She just retweeted the article. So as far as I was concerned, you didn't know if she was in support of that or against that, but she was immediately cancelled with no context, no conversation around it, nothing. And as far as I'm concerned, she's written one of the greatest sort of feminist novels of all time, and is inclusive as a writer. But actually, just like that, it was like, well, that's it, she's done. And that's what I worry about. Obviously, for obvious nutcases like Lawrence Fox, you're like, okay, you need an intervention. Stop tweeting. Someone take away your phone. But I'm concerned about the fact that things can turn very quickly, I guess.
But with that example, is that not really... I don't want to sort of make it a blame thing, but is it not really her fault for not actually putting any context around something that she's retweeting? If you're just putting something out blindly, people are going to assume the worst unless you actually clarify it with a statement saying, this is wrong, this is right. So you're actually you're taking a stance. By not taking a stance, you're almost letting people think there is a default stance, and it's usually the worst one.
Especially the trans thing. And I remember Gina Carano, how do you pronounce her name? Gina Carano?
Yeah.
And again, you can't have everybody thinking the same way. She was just being a dick, though. That's the thing. She didn't need to tweet my pronouns or be book or something. She was just being an arsehole. She was just trying to wind people up. And she was working on one of the biggest shows at Disney at the time. And they did say to her, and Pedro Pascal even said to her, but she just decided, no, me being an arsehole is more important than my job.
Well, Pedro Pascal's sister, not transgender. So I don't know how Gina Carano can tweet this stuff, and perhaps even he stepped in and was like,
he did. I think he did. Yeah. He explained to her the importance of pronouns and stuff and try to have a conversation with her, and she went, yeah, I got that. But I'm talking about a character. So that's the thing. So in her case, she felt it was her freedom of speech was very important to tweet stuff than be employed. And then she gets sacked, and it's like, oh my God, I'm cancelled. It's like, you're being a dick. You can have these views if you want, but you're being a dick about it.
Yeah. I mean, she threw away a career, really, because there was going to be a whole program around her character from Star Wars as well. That's what it was planned to be.
It's not like she was drunk and said something or accidentally said something, or people were looking through old tweets. She just kept saying stuff, even though she was told this isn't a good idea.
Yeah. And in that case, no, absolutely. Social media's done it's stepped in and done the right thing, as it were, by flagging this and going, this is a person going out of their way. I guess for me, the trial by social media thing comes in with of the James Gunn tweet. So you said something 10 years ago. Obviously, it's horrific, but does that merit cancellation? No.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Especially since he actually apologised for them beforehand, before all this blew up. It was obviously Marvel had done their due diligence and sort of pointed this stuff out, saying that's not good. It's not a good look. So therefore, at the time, he said, look, there was previous tweets. It was what I was doing at the time. It wasn't reflective on whatever. And looking back on it, it's really bad. And he sort of unreservedly apologised, but that wasn't good enough because it actually surfaced later on, and they chose to ignore the fact that he had actually sort of pre-apologised. He'd done a pre-apology for it. So that was going to blow up anyway. that was taken as sort of a cause. It was like a right-wing cause. It was almost to get back, because this was, if you think about it, it was round about the time of Gina Carano, and there was some other people, like right-wing figures, who were getting cancelled because of their views. So it was almost like they were looking. Yeah, it was revenge. Yeah, that's what
they done the same. Anthony Jeselnik as well, went through his old tweets, and he just went, so. He's a very offensive, controversial comedian, but it was really funny because he refused to fight people for resurfaced tweets saying, "Oh, that's Trump here. Look what he's saying. He's really well viewed." And he's replying to them, "But fuck off." He's just like.
What I don't understand though is why everyone thinks that Hollywood is this like paragon of virtue, which from day dot it never has been. There's all like Hollywood, like any other, let's call it a workplace, is going to have a spectrum of political opinions or personal opinions or religious beliefs or whatever, and whether you agree with them or not, that is basically what a workplace is. You're going to meet people that maybe, you know, so it is sort of held almost to a different standard, I think, where we expect our actors and creators to be way more liberal than I think the vast majority of them are, because I bet a lot of them, even from a financial or perspective or whatever, you know, may vote Republican just because it suits their finances as opposed to anything else.
I mean, look,
but I think
especially like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example, very famous Republican through his whole career. He's kind of meant more kind of centre in recent years, but famously 80s and 90s, very proud Republican. I know, but
equally look at the type of audience he's likely to attract, though. Being a Republican isn't going to do him any damage. I think that's maybe the difference. Whereas if you somebody on The Mandalorian, which is all like nice and inclusive and different people from different, you know, planets and all that coming together to work for the greater good, you don't expect someone who works on that show to be a dickhead.
But it's not so, because you can imagine like Pedro Pascal did interviewed. I don't really get politics and that, but you know, I thought when they vote Biden again, people be like and go mental, and it's like, well, are people not allowed to have different opinions now? There's bad, you know, it's like, so it's just like we're trying to pigeonhole people. As you say this out, they're about to spread Hollywood for this like liberal paradise, this utopian place where everybody's inclusive. There's no hate, and we're gonna get is really sterile, homogenized content. It's not very good.
I'm surprised it hasn't gone that way already, because if you think about it, studios, when they're promoting something, you would have thought they would have sort of laid the law down with any interviewer that happens across these people. It says if you write something or you ask a question that's going to elicit a controversial answer, you will never get an interview with anybody again. You will basically be cancelled.
It does for some people, though. People like Tom Cruise, for example. So after that public, you know, jumping on the couch thing, he has as far as I'm aware, you are allowed to talk about the film that he's promoting, the dangerous stuff that you are not allowed to ask him questions about, you know, so who are you dating? Or, you know, I think there are some stars that do have a very careful set of questions given to them because their team or PR or whatever are scared that if they are asked about, you know, and what's your opinion on the situation in Ukraine, that suddenly an answer comes out that you can't retract.
Well, what's the guy's name for life, man? Tom Felton played Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter. He was getting interviewed, and he was asked just randomly what he thought of J.K. Rowling's views on trans people, and he kind of went, his publicist just went, interview's over. And I thought, that sounded a bit extreme, but at the same time, fair play, because he's there to talk about his film, and it's a bit of a shitty question to ask somebody who's not been involved with J.K. Rowling in like 10 years. He's there to talk about his film, and they're just trying to get a controversial statement out of him.
I do wonder though if that's because like Daniel Radcliffe has come out and been really vociferous about how he doesn't support her views, because obviously he does a lot of work with like trans community groups and things like that. So I wondered if it was just trying to elicit a statement like that. But ultimately, yeah, you're right. What the fuck has that got to do with, you know, a film that he's not been in a Harry Potter film for 10 years, whatever. What the fuck has that got to do with the film that he's promoting?
Done the same with Channel 4 news broadcast. I can't be his name for life now, but you'd know him to see him. He was interviewing Quentin Tarantino and Robert Downey Jr. They had 2 interviews. And Robert Downey Jr., they kept bringing up rehab and his drug problems and that. So Robert Downey Jr. just went, the interview's over, and walked off, because he went, I'm looking to talk about this. This has been well established. But Tarantino just went back at him and jostled, because he went, it was the Django's that you think in gun violence and films like promotes real violence in real life and that. And Tarantino was like, nah, but I'm not really going to talk about that. And he kept bringing it back. He's like, well, Jamie Foxx was talking about it. Well, go and interview Jamie Foxx then. It's like that's, it's like, everything has to. Why? It's, they talk about a film. I know a film is even controversial. Robert Downey Jr.'s case. Why go back to his past, which is well established?
Yeah,
because it's for headlines though. So if you're a journalist and you get a sound bite of him saying X, Y, and Z, or you are able to print a headline of Robert Downey Jr. says such and such, that makes you maybe more valuable as a journalist without maybe. I don't know. It's tricky because with people like, so for example, like Rob Lowe and Robert Downey Jr. obviously had kind of scandals, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, Rob Lowe's an interesting one as well.
Yeah, roughly at the same time, and they do seem to have been allowed back into the fold. But again, I'm lumping those two together, and that's maybe not fair because obviously Robert Downey Jr. was addiction issues. Rob Lowe again was accused of having sex with an underage girl. Where I'm sort of, I suppose it's circling back to what you were saying about a sliding scale, Sammy, is like, who makes the rules then? So they're obviously welcomed back into the fold, but someone like, I don't know who's been cancelled recently. Someone like Alec Baldwin maybe might not be. So who makes the decisions?
Yeah, who does make the decisions? As John was alluding to earlier, it's just a purely financial thing of this person's certain numbers, get rid of them.
And a lot of it's luck as well. If you think about it, the Downey Jr. one, he went through the whole system. He had his addiction issues. He actually was convicted. I don't know if he did actually any like sort of real jail time, but he went through that whole process. It wasn't like Thomas said earlier, it's circumstances, it's different elements. So he actually sort of hit rock bottom, and he didn't completely hide everything. You can't really hide it when you're on television and you're in court, So he had been through all that publicly. Now, after all that, it was a case of would anybody hire him? So that was careful. It was carefully managed, his sort of return, and every step of the way was a real trial for him. A poor use of words, obviously. I didn't actually mean that. So any role that he went for, he brought all this baggage with him. So it was up to the individual film or project, whereas he would actually be taken on because it was the likes of Wonder Boys, the Michael Douglas, Curtis Hanson film that came out, and he was in that in a supporting role. Now, with Iron Man, he wasn't the first choice for the role. The people who made it had to fight in order to get him into that role, which is a tale as old as Hollywood again, bringing in people who the filmmakers want but the studio don't want because they're slightly controversial, or they don't think they're not worth the hassle. Marlon Brando, for instance, having to audition for The Godfather because the studio didn't want him, too controversial because of his views in the late 60s and everything. The fact that he sort of railed against the Hollywood machine and everything to do with that. So Downey Jr.'s an interesting one. He had a chance to do it. A lot of them won't get that chance now because they're just deemed to be toxic, and that's it. Career's over. There's plenty of other people. For every Alec Baldwin there is for every actor in his 60s, there are dozens of them, hanging about looking for work that can quite easily fill in the role he's doing now. He's a good actor, but there are plenty of good actors out there.
Do you know what I think? And I was thinking about this the other day. Do you know what I think the real turning point of this came? And I hate to bring him up, Mel Gibson. Because I think he was right on the cusp of the whole social media thing and it just not quite going away. And I think that he is, because if you think on the grand scheme of things, obviously he was racist, anti-Semitic. He had beaten up his wife and he was obviously an alcoholic. But I do wonder if that had happened 20 years previously, would he have been managed back in? Whereas I think because it happened at the time that it did, and it just sort of seems to follow him around. Like he's done a couple of, what was the one he did with the girl from The Boys? Bloodfather, that film. He's done the Daddy's Home film. Now there's rumours, it's not confirmed because we haven't seen him in a trailer, that he's going to be in the Hotel Continental series. And he's done sort of small bits here and there, but he's never been managed back in quite on a scale the way like Robert Downey Jr. has, or even Rob Lowe. And I feel like it's the timing of that, potentially. I'm not saying just to be clear, because I know that there's plenty,
You're right. It was one of the first examples of the information being out there on social media. He obviously made the mistake of being recorded when he was making a lot of anti-Semitic remarks and everything. So there's no way to sort of muddle that. It's out there, so therefore it was very difficult for him to come back. And like I say, he hasn't really. He's still around, but you don't see him as top billing on a big film or the special guest star or anything, that's sort of a pivotal but small role in a film, sort of a father figure role. You don't, I mean, would you want him as your dad? Yeah.
And that whole thing is realistic. I mean, not a Hollywood point of view, with a fan point of view, it's crazy Mel. Mel's a bit mental. And he's got this kind of like image of just like a bit wild, but it's like, well, what you said though. It's like a bit of kind of wild man, having a few drinks and carrying on and smashing the place up at a party type for being racist.
Yeah, but the thing is, and this is what I mean about if it happened 20 years earlier, because I am 100% convinced that he is not the only person that has said those things or done those particular things. I mean, if you look back at books that talk about, classic Hollywood and the studio system and all the sort of abortions, abuse and drug use and alcoholism and, obviously gay relationships were seen as unacceptable. So all of this was covered up at the time. And it was just really managed. Your whole image was managed, whereas I feel like he was maybe on the cut. Him and maybe Hugh Grant with obviously his prostitution, but then Hugh Grant sort of went away and has come back and for whatever reason, because it's almost like, oh well, he was this sort of bumbling English gent and he sort of get caught up and he said he's sorry and all this sort of thing, but whereas Mel Gibson has obviously never appeared apologetic. But because I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking about Johnny Depp, because obviously he has had his new film premiere at Cannes, and I was 100% convinced that after that trial, the two of them, as in him and Amber Heard, were finished, like absolutely finished. But he seems very ballsy about, well, I'm the aggrieved party here, so why shouldn't I have a career now? And part of me wants to say to him, no, go away, do the, take the time, because neither of you came out of this covered in glory, and actually it feels a bit gross seeing him now, I think.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes people just need to go away for a while, as you're saying. Let people forget about you for a bit and then come back and then see if people want to see you.
It's more difficult now, though, to go away and come back because the stuff is still there. It's not like before when there weren't websites dedicated to these sort of things. So, you can't just... Before, you would have more trouble picking up things because it was just newspaper-based or whatever. But now, all you need to do is put in a hashtag Johnny Depp and you can find everything almost immediately, and it's just come back and it's completely fresh.
And what's interesting about that trial is that, we talked about trial by social media. It obviously, people were literally sitting on their lunch break watching what had been said in statements that day through Twitter or whatever. But what was also interesting was that celebrities who came out and said they supported one or the other were also at threat of being cancelled because of whose side they'd fit, which is just madness to me. It turns the whole thing into a circus.
It does. It's that way. It's the kind of sliding scale thing. And people really want to get cancelled now just because they've got different views from someone. That seems to be the measuring stick for a lot of people. Like you take a trans thing, for example, Margaret Atwood retweeting that article. Again, as you're saying, John, we retweet automatically if people think the worst and jump to that thing, but engage in conversation first, maybe. People go from 0 to 60.
Yeah, but like you just said there, conversation doesn't work because if you say something, you're not going to have a civil conversation with somebody on a topic. They're just going to, they have an opinion and you're not going to change that opinion. That's now.
Not on the internet anyway, because I don't think the internet leaves any place for nuance. Whereas if we were sitting in the pub and we were having a conversation and maybe we had a disagreement over something, at least you could see the other person's point of view. They could explain their point, you could explain yours. And who knows, maybe you would even change your mind. The internet does not leave any space for that whatsoever.
It's weird though, especially with Twitter, has that entitlement from people. I'm going to tweet this famous person and I expect a response.
Yeah.
Why? And plus, people speak to each other on the internet the way they would never speak to each other in the pub in real life.
I know.
Somebody described it. It's like road rage. You know, people are in their car, they're protected, so they'll act a way they wouldn't if you bumped into somebody in the street. And Twitter users are the same because they know they're safe from any retaliation.
Yep, totally. Yep.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think one of the things that, so I put out a tweet to say we were going to discuss this, and I asked people for examples. Obviously, Kevin Spacey came up. That's never going away, is it? But one of the interesting examples that came up was Shia LaBeouf. So he went on, I don't know if you guys listened to John Bernthal's Real Ones podcast that he produced during lockdown, but he had quite a few sort of controversial figures on there, people who'd maybe done particularly bad things, and now they were sort of coming on to explain this is who I was and this is who I am now. So Shia LaBeouf went on that podcast and said, look, hold my hands up. I was an awful person. I'm really sorry. Is that enough?
I think in his case, he's kind of getting there in terms of rehabilitation, because one of his most recent films was, wasn't it Peanut Butter Falcon? It was one where it was basically his story as a child actor.
Honey Boy.
And yeah, Honey Boy. That was almost like a step within a rehabilitation process, saying, yeah, I'm a complete dick, but this is some of the reasons why. But he also, like you say, he's held his hands up and says, yes, I'm still working through it, and it's still working against him, because obviously there was a whole thing about Don't Worry Darling, where he was cast in that, and then Olivia Wilde basically sacked him because of perceived issues that he still had, as and he would be like a real disruptive presence and all that. And there's been a whole back and forward about that. And Olivia Wilde's another reasonably controversial character at the moment as well. So yeah, he's not quite there, but he's getting there. He is coming back. And again, he's been doing smaller things. He's not been trying to relaunch himself as a leading man quite yet, but it will come. It definitely will.
Do you think so?
I think so, yeah. I think he will come back, yes. And the first step towards it is, like you said, he owned up to it and says, yeah, I was a dick and I am a dick, without really sugarcoating it in any way. If that's kind of the first step to, if people say, yeah, I was horrible, but I've got the capacity to change, and this is what I'm going to do. And then if they follow through with that, that's fine. But if they don't, that's where it just keeps rumbling on and on and on. With the likes of Kevin Spacey's a slightly different one, because there's active court cases against him. One seems to go away, and then another one pops up, and then another one pops up.
Yeah, but he's also another one that's not come out and been apologetic and said he's been. Remember, he put out that weird a video where he was Frank Underwood. Like, what the fuck was that all about?
Yeah, he used the now famous Philip Schofield defense and saying, "Oh, I'm actually gay," so leave me alone.
Although, again, so obviously it's not a film, but the Philip Schofield thing I kind of followed with interest, because Twitter is very much divided between, you are persecuting a gay man and no, he's a horrible, toxic person. So there's, again, you fall into two, like most things on Twitter, right? You fall into one of two camps. But yeah, I think the Shia LaBeouf is, I'm surprised you think he will come back. I don't think he'll ever be back on the scale that he perhaps was. But I think that he has been very public about his acknowledgement of his bad behaviour, which I think is maybe where he differs from Ezra Miller. Is that right? Has he ever come out and said anything publicly?
He has, but it's been through his... It's very much filtered through the whole media engine. So they're keeping him away from really saying very much. It's sort of a Tom Cruise idea, you can talk about the film, can't really talk about anything else, and they're limiting the exposure. If you think about it, for like this $200 million film, the star hasn't been, on every single talk show, doing, like, basically touring the world in support of it. You would get with the likes of, like, Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 had everybody doing talk shows, doing podcasts, doing all sorts of interviews and stuff that were all over the place. But yeah, with The Flash, it's not been at that sort of level.
So I'm really glad that you brought Guardians of the Galaxy up. I was hoping someone would, because obviously everybody has been on the press tour. Now there are rumours about Chris Pratt's sort of evangelical religious faith and the faith he used to go to Hillsong Church, obviously, which is famously very anti-LGBTQIA+. And he's said comments, so he's actually been dug up over lots of things. So he, for example, thanked his now wife for creating a perfect child when their first daughter was born, and obviously his son with Anna Faris has, I think, learning disabilities or physical disabilities. And he said a few things on his Instagram captions where if you read them with a sort of religious lens around them, you would go, oh, you think, your wife's place is in the kitchen? Huh? Like, I feel like he has not snuck under the radar because everybody seems to be aware of his religious affiliations. Again, why is that a free pass? Because let's be honest, Tom Cruise does get hammered over the Scientology thing. So why should Chris Pratt not get hammered over something just because it happens to be an offshoot of Christianity?
We did very briefly, but again, I think it was because it wasn't helping his box office numbers, so people were cool with it. I think the minute it starts affecting the box office, that's when Hollywood takes action. In terms of, from a public point of view, I think he has been hammered in the whole Twitter sphere and that. It didn't do him any favours when he was cast as Mario either. And people were like, what the fuck? And then the film was $1 billion, so it's, well, you can't stop the Chris Pratt machine.
I think that perhaps says more about the movie. Who goes to see movies and who makes movies is perhaps the answer to the Chris Pratt conundrum, if you want to call it that. Because he has been acknowledged as Marvel's least popular Chris. So I just don't understand why he maybe gets a free pass or whatever. I think with things like that, so it's almost like a kind of, I don't want to say open secret, but it does come back to that whole, the Weinstein thing was seen as like an open secret. The Polanski thing was like an open secret. Why the fuck let's come back to the idea of Hollywood as a workplace. Why would you put up with this open secret of, if that man wants to put you in a film, you are potentially going to be raped by him, but it's fine because you'll get an Oscar at the end of it. Why have they put up with these open secrets for so long?
Well, careers are made and broken on single decisions. That's what it comes down to. It's
money and power.
Yeah, money. Well, exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. That's what it is. Always has been. If you think about it, the casting couch.
Yeah. Well, that's always been a thing, but it's just because I'm looking at this and I think when I even looking at the list of people who have been cancelled recently, it's majority men. Sorry, guys. There's the occasional woman who says something or does something like your J.K. Rowling's or your Gina Carano's. But for me, it's like if you knew that there was a sexual predator in your midst, but because he turns out great movies, I personally can't get my head around that, and that's someone to me that should have been cancelled, if you want to talk about it in those terms, a long time ago. And that's why I don't understand the sliding scale that you've obviously talked about, because why was it okay to have a rapist essentially living and working amongst a lot of vulnerable creative people, but it's not okay to, I don't know, tweet something out or whatever? I don't understand the
people turned a blind eye. It was beneficial to them. It's horrible to say, but it's just as John said there, careers made and broken, and people are in that kind of system thinking, I don't want to rock the boat here. If I speak up, I'm the one that's going to be. Maybe people go to that kind of point of view that if I speak up, I will be blacklisted. I won't be able to find work, and he'll continue doing what he's doing.
So, and I do agree with that, because look at is it Katherine Hagel spoke up about the poor conditions for women in Hollywood, and in particular on the set of Grey's Anatomy, and then her career fucking tanked. I think the last thing I actually saw, and I'm embarrassed to admit that I've seen this, was The Ugly Truth with Gerard Butler. It's a terrible film to, if you're an incel, it probably really plays into how you think men and women should be. But her career absolutely fell off a cliff because she dared to say, wait a minute here, I don't think this is, I don't like the way this is working, sort of thing.
Does she also have a go at the writers at Grey's Anatomy during a speech at the Emmys?
Oh, did she? I didn't know that.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, she also has a go at the writers. People are like, well, what were you anymore? So there was some other stuff there as well with that one. But again, yeah, she don't see on anything these days.
No.
But again, that kind of sliding scale thing, Will Smith, he's not making much of a comeback anytime soon.
Too
Do
soon.
you think so?
Yeah, he's toxic. Just apparently, the rumour is they reached out to Tom Cruise to help revitalise his career, and Tom Cruise went, "No."
Fuck.
I know.
But okay,
you're
that's
right, John, it's too
interesting.
soon.
Do you think that Tom Cruise? Sorry, on you go.
That's over a year ago now, but it's within the year. Will Smith just kind of wanted that ball keep on rolling rather than the whole just go away for a wee bit and come back.
Yeah, if he goes away for
Tom
4
Cruise...
years, 5 years, he will come back. But like I say, it's far too soon. I think part of that was because he still had commitments that people had not kicked him off of, like that Apple film. That was, if you actually look at that film, you think that would be an Oscar contender for him, you know, the kind of role. But it went nowhere because, well, I don't think, is he eligible? He's been kicked out of the academy, hasn't he? So,
yeah.
Aye.
So there's two facets to that. One, I don't think Tom Cruise would touch him because Tom Cruise would be worried about his own public image of being perceived to help someone like that. But equally, so there's a lot of people who say, and so Will Smith's one of the people that I looked into, there's a lot of people saying on Twitter that if he was a white man who had done that, his redemption arc would have been a lot shorter and quicker than obviously being a black man doing that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that or whether you want to get into that or not, but I do think that it was a very public moment, and I guess that whereas some of the stuff maybe happened behind closed doors or it's been a tweet that's resurfaced from decades ago, this all felt very, very public, and I don't know if that's contributed to the fact that he needs to go away for quite some time, as well as just how obvious the sort of breakdown was, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and I suppose as well, it's like it wasn't just a case of like the story of Will Smith assaults Chris Rock in the street and at a party. It was the Oscars, the pinnacle of Hollywood. And for me, the thing about it was he walked up, slapped him, and went and just sat back down when nothing happened. Then he got arrested. There was no controversy. He wasn't asked to leave.
But I don't think people knew if that was a bit or not, because if you look at how the camera pans the room, there are some people who are almost sort of nervous laughing as if to say, oh, this is a skit or something. I don't think everyone really realised at first that it was serious.
Yeah. Because the way that the angles that it was seen from, it almost looked as if it was like a fake slap. But obviously it was very real. But yeah, there was a lot of bewilderment because the whole narrative around the Oscars over the last couple of years has been the fact that the audience figures are really dropping because people don't want to sit and watch people just, you know, thanking their agents and stuff like that. So they have to brighten up in some way. So when I saw that at first, I thought that's just a publicity stunt. They're trying to, you know, make it more interesting, but obviously it wasn't. But that's just my cynical mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is genuinely fair. I think a lot of people thought it was yeah, and you're right, because there's the way when it's seen, when you see it from, if Will Smith has his back to you, it almost like the sound happens after the fact, so it does look like a skit or something. How far we've come from having Seth MacFarlane sing "We Saw Your Boobs" to a whole bunch of women in the audience, which again he didn't get cancelled for, so he seems to be, you know.
Seth MacFarlane's an interesting one as well, and same with the guys for South Park. They've tried with South Park to cancel them, and they're just like, no.
Yeah.
The Scientologists have come after South Park, obviously, really, really hard. I don't know. I feel like Seth MacFarlane, because everyone just thinks, oh, it's just Family Guy. He does seem to get away with stuff, but actually, if you look at how tasteless some of, like the "We Saw Your Boobs" thing, like, what the fuck? How was that ever greenlit for a major, you know, awards ceremony and stuff like that? It's just tasteless, and it's actually just a bit tacky. And you would never sing a song about "We Saw Your Dick," right? Because the standard is just so different. But I feel like he almost gets away with it because it's like, oh, but it's Family Guy. So,
but it's also that way as well. Should Seth MacFarlane be held accountable because it's a comedian? And then it comes out a whole is like people think when comedians say stuff, that's what they mean, rather than the comedians telling jokes. Like Seth MacFarlane, Family Guys, South Park and stuff. I think for the most part, people have the sense to say, well, you know what, that's not real life. And it's also a cartoon, which makes it more kind of absurd. Whereas Tarantino, for example, where he's a character and the character says racial slurs, Tarantino therefore must be racist. It's maybe his characters are racist. No, he shouldn't be saying that stuff. He's not saying that he's writing it, but he shouldn't be writing it. It's like, well, So now you can't, like, again, do you cancel characters?
But that's what it comes back to. So if this character, for example, is, well, let's take it at the sort of example, like look at Black Klansman, where you obviously had Klan members saying racial slurs and all. Is that okay because there's a Black director and writer behind it? Whereas if Tarantino were to write a racist character who was saying these things, I don't believe we can get into the realms of that. I'm firmly against, like, if a character's meant to be a certain way, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, I feel like you can write the character and you can not like the character and you can not like what the character stands for, but I don't think that's caused, you shouldn't cancel a writer or director because a character in a film pissed you off. That seems absurd.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I was obviously looking at different people for that. Armie Hammer, we've obviously joked about whether we should be joking about it or not. I don't know. He's so far off a comeback, it's unreal. Like, he's the big one that stands out for me as being like, he's going to go away and he probably won't have a career at the other end of this, because not only was there sort of, as I say, the sexual assault elements of what he'd done, there was this sort of gratuitous kind of cannibalistic element to it. And whilst I think we have become slightly more grotesque as content consumers, because obviously you have like your true crime pods, your true crime documentaries, all that sort of thing, and we seem to really love all the dirty details of that. I think when there's actually a real life example and it's someone who you maybe liked in a film, you're like, whoa, that's it. He is done.
Yeah, I don't see him making any much of a comeback.
No, I think he's about the only one. Like Alec Baldwin, I feel like probably will still work. I think Armie, and I always thought that Johnny Depp was finished as well, I must admit. I thought he was absolutely done, but Armie Hammer's the only recent example I can think of where I think he is probably finished in terms of career. Obviously, we touched on it at the start. You guys said that some people say that cancel culture doesn't exist. Does it? Should it? Where do we go from here, I guess?
I think it's they need to stop using the term cancel culture for a start. As John said, it's always been there. We mentioned the fact in Hollywood, people go blacklisted. People have always been sacked for stuff. Has anybody really been? What does that even mean anymore? Though cancelled? Can you cancel a person?
Yeah.
You sound like Bill. You sound like Bill Burr, who ironically hasn't been cancelled, and I'm surprised that he hasn't been.
Again, there's some guys that are just bulletproof because they don't allow. I think sometimes these guys don't allow themselves to be cancelled either because they don't back down and they go, "No, I'm a comedian. I'm going to say that stuff." I think it's hard to cancel a comedian because, take Frankie Boyle for example. Frankie Boyle has said, in my opinion, much worse than Ricky Gervais. That Frankie Boyle had the cheek to attack Ricky Gervais for his jokes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think so. After some of the controversial things that he has said, which, whether you give comedians sort of more license or not is a whole other thing in itself. But I think after some of the comment, he sort of went away after he did a sort of series of shows on Channel 4 or whatever, and then sort of went away for a while, and then is now doing like maybe Taskmaster or whatever. But I think I feel like you want a comedian to push the boundaries a bit. You want that, as long as it's not actively like going after someone in a really distasteful way. Like you don't go just to hear knock jokes. You go to have things pushed slightly. Like you want that sort of gasp, don't you, when somebody tells a joke? And you're right. Just because a comedian says it as part of a routine doesn't mean that's actually what they think. But yeah, it's a tricky one.
Because that's a thing. Because that's what people starting to say with people with characters now. As we were mentioning, the writers written this. That must be their thoughts. It's like, well, it's just not that bad character. Not every character has to be this. I keep using Disney as an example because I think Disney are doing this for their characters. Whiter than white, ironically.
That's what they've been doing for a long time.
Yes. But they are, they're kind of, and I know we get these, it's good versus evil and all of this stuff, but if your characters have no struggles and are just perfect. I watched 2 trailers yesterday, one for Indiana Jones and one for Blue Beetle. I'm going to have to talk a wee bit here, but again, is this a kind of landscape? Indiana Jones, they make a joke about capitalism in the trailer. And then Blue Beetle, they mentioned Batman, and the guy turns and says, Batman's a fascist. It's a wee throwaway comment, it's a joke, but it's almost like, we've got to cancel Batman now? Is Indiana Jones going to be a political vehicle about capitalism? Does everything need to be left-wing and art?
Basically, I don't think we know where it's going to go. I think
because the minute you veer centre right, you're cancelled.
Yeah. And like you say, Thomas, the actual word or the phrase cancel culture has just been, it doesn't mean anything. It's been co-opted in arguments the same way that woke has been co-opted. It doesn't actually mean what people think it means, to quote The Princess Bride. So it's not going to go away. The name may change, but it will be always around, I think, and it's only going to get worse. As you've got to remember, I mean, a lot of celebrities and actors may be very good at what they do. They may be very good at bringing a character to life, but a lot of them are really, really stupid. They just don't have any sense. So, you know, they're going to do stupid things. They may play all sorts of very interesting characters on screen, very important people, presidents and kings and queens and professors and what have you. And people tend to think of these people as those characters. They take those characteristics and say, oh, he must be a smart person. So when they turn around and not be a smart person in real life, you think, oh, okay. It's just, it's perception, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we need to remember is that ultimately these people are still human and we need to leave capacity for flaws. I'm not saying that, you know, being a paedophile or a racist or whatever is a flaw. You obviously should have repercussions for that. But for someone saying a silly thing 10 years ago or whatever, that to me is just a flaw or a mistake. It's the sliding scale is what troubles me more than anything else. But yeah, I think that's everything from me. Does anyone want to add any other thoughts on being cancelled before this podcast eventually gets us cancelled?
Well, just the fact that you two kept misgendering Ezra Miller earlier, so you're probably cancelled.
I completely forgot about that. I can only apologise to
I'm so
whoever the person that listens to, because no doubt they will end up cancelling us. Of course, all I need to do, though, is actually say the word they. And I'll insert they every time. I'll go back and edit
even for
every single instance. Yeah, yeah. So I'll edit.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, if I was going to say us, but if you two misgendering Ezra Miller is worse than Ezra Miller, you know, starting a cult, brainwashing people, grooming people, getting into houses, assaulting people, then the world's a bit fucked.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Kanye's just started his own cult, hasn't he? Or no, religion, he's called it.
He's cancelled.
Yeah. The thing you've got to remember is, would the world be a better place without the Moviescramble podcast?
No.
I'm divided on it. I don't know.
Apologies for misjudging Ezra Miller. I wasn't aware that they prefer they pronouns as opposed to he pronouns, so apologies for that.
Well, see what we could do. If this does get cancelled, it'll get picked up on the back of the Flash, make it some hits. We can go on GMB News with Dan Wooten and discuss the podcast and Piers Morgan.
Joe Rogan
before we know it.
I was going to say Eamon Holmes. You went straight to Joe Rogan. What I love about Eamon Holmes, though, is talking about white saviour. He's come out and be like, yeah, I've been telling you for years that Philip Schofield's a pedo and that Good Morning Britain or whatever it's called is full of toxic behaviour. Like, okay, mate, where were you then? You should have been calling this out at the time if that's what you saw. He wants a bigger face on the poster than Philip Schofield. Okay, well, that's all from the Moviescramble podcast, and hopefully you haven't cancelled us after listening to this. If you want to get in touch with us, you can by emailing podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. You can find us on all the social platforms at Moviescramble, and you can drop Simmy a line at Simmy41. Are you still that? Yep. And John is at Scramble John, or John Scramble even, and I'm at Miss Mamie Peas. Do let us know if there's anything you'd like us to cover in the podcast, whether that's a film or a particular topic. But that's all for now. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.